Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror, and today I bring you my December wrap up.
It's coffee time.
So December was actually a pretty good month for me in the end. I ended up reading a total of 14 things, but keep in mind that I did read a bunch of horror novellas, which are obviously short, and I also did listen to 2 audiobooks, so that is how I managed to read so much in December. Nevertheless, I'm very happy with that number. I feel like I managed to read everything that I had prioritized and planned for December, so I am very satisfied. And I actually ended up the year reading a book that became one of my favorites against all odds. So I basically finished the year with a new favorite. So let's talk about all the books that I read in the month of December. First of all, let's talk about all the horror novellas that were Christmas themed that I read during December. And because I already have a full reading vlog reading all of these and talking in depth about them, sharing my thoughts about them, I'm just gonna quickly let you know my rating and a general idea of how the novellas were. First we have Santa Morte Claus by R.J. Benetti, and this one was definitely not for me. I had a lot of problems with this novella, and it was not particularly because of the explicit graphic gore. It was more something to do with certain topics that were brought up. So this follows a family that is getting ready to celebrate Christmas together, but earlier in the day when they were doing their Christmas shopping, they disregarded a Santa Claus that was asking for a little bit of money, and that Santa Claus is now coming back to knock on their door and basically ruin Christmas for them because he's going to start killing them one by one. Now, the things that bothered me with this book were that it's a novella, so you don't have too much time to go into detail and explain important topics. And when you bring up Hitler, the Mexicans, the wall with Mexico, then there's also a mention about needles with AIDS being something that can create tension in a room. I thought it was very distasteful. There is also a commentary about people with Down syndrome that I thought was also tasteless. And so in the end, I was just horrified by the way that the author just talked about these topics in such a tasteless manner. It might have been just me, I don't know, but definitely I'm not going to be picking up the sequel. Then we have Disputation by Judith Sonnet, and this one was fun. I mean, the only thing is that the horror in this book was perhaps a little bit too disgusting for me, even though I can take a lot. But this follows basically 2 women that are trying to get their wish this Christmas. So they decide to kidnap Santa Claus, and they are not gonna let him go until he gives them what they want for Christmas, basically. And things escalate very quickly. Santa Claus wakes up tied up to a chair and unable to escape, and he's at the mercy of these 2 women. And kind of like the motives behind the kidnapping and everything were a little bit too much for me. Red Christmas by Alice B. Sullivan. I thought this was a fun Christmas story with zombies. Basically, a year ago there was an outbreak of a virus and people have become zombie-like creatures. Now this year we follow some of the survivors, and they are trying to put together a Christmas tree to kind of, keep the normalcy. And also because our main character's mother always had so much love for Christmas and the Christmas tree and decorating it, and they are missing the star for the tree. So they go on a journey to try to get the star. They go to a mall. It's full of zombies. It was fun. It was bloody. And I think this is a great one to pick if you want a horror book that takes place during Christmas. Next we have I Found Christmas Lights Slithering Up My Street by Ben Farding. And this follows Douglas. So his parents do not want to celebrate Christmas this year, and I understand why. Basically, last year during Christmas, his sister died. So the parents don't want to celebrate Christmas anymore because obviously it only brings back bad memories. But Douglas really wants to celebrate Christmas. He loves to see the Christmas lights in the neighborhood, and so he's in a mission to decorate with Christmas lights some of the houses in the neighborhood that are not occupied at the moment. And so he's trying to steal a little bit of, decoration from this neighbor, from that neighbor, and then he finds some very interesting and different Christmas lights, and he decides to take them to use them for, the decoration of these houses. However, by removing those Christmas lights from where they were hidden, he has unleashed another evil. And this evil that he released is taking over the neighborhood, and people are starting to die. This is a tale of grief, of loss of identity, especially when somebody dies and you're only known as, the brother from the girl that died, and especially having kids in this story as the main characters going through all of these made it a lot more heartfelt than probably a story like this should be. It is also a little bit fantastical / supernatural, but I thought it was a great way to tell a story about grief, but also about Christmas and allowing yourself to enjoy life and celebrate, even though this season of Christmas for our main character also means grieving his sister. And the last one that I read is The Abominable Snowman by Brian G. Berry, and this one was the longest one. It was basically a novel-length book already. It was, I think, around 200 pages, but this one was my favorite from all the ones that I read because I thought that it was a fantastic way of approaching a Christmas horror. We are in a small town. There are a lot of grisly murders are happening at the moment. The police doesn't know what's going on, and as they are investigating, they will start hearing from people in town that there's something wrong with the snowman. The sheriff doesn't believe all the people in town that are saying that there's something wrong with the snowman. They seem to be moving and attacking people. The sheriff is like, guys, you probably are not seeing things correctly. There's a snowstorm outside, not good visibility, you're probably tripping. And then the snowmen are literally killing entire families in this town. And it's very bloody, it's a bloodbath, and it's just so much fun to have snowmen killing people, let me tell you that. So this is definitely one that I would recommend you for this Christmas if you're looking for a horror that really truly embraces the Christmas spirit. All right, now let's go to the other books that I read that were not Christmas themed horror novellas. Recommended reading by Paul Gotcha, and this is a YA rom-com, and it just came out now in the month of January 2025, and I wanted to read this one because, I wanted to read more arcs, and was a romance, and I do like to read romance books during Christmas season, but unfortunately this one was not as good as I had hoped. The story follows Bobby. He is a hopeless romantic. He also loves books, but he also likes to meddle. He loves to get into people's business, and he thinks that he is the best matchmaker in the world. After some tragic events, he finds himself working at his uncle's bookstore. It's a little bit outdated, so I really loved how he was trying to help his uncle modernize the store, appeal to other types of readers, how he knew what kind of books to recommend to people. Like, this book had so much potential and so many things that I really enjoyed, but the pacing, I think, is what killed it for me, because it was very slow, very repetitive, and I found myself kind of forcing myself to keep going to see if things would speed up and catch up and we would get to the good stuff. The problem is that more than a contemporary rom-com, this felt like the story of Bobby and how he was trying to come to terms with the fact that he can't control everything and everybody, and that he needs to accept himself and stop trying to push people. And I don't know, it just, the romance bit was kind of missing for the majority of the book, and I was looking for a romance book. So this obviously affected my reading experience, and it can be also seen reflected in the rating. However, it did have really good characters. I just think that this book had a lot of potential, but it didn't quite hit the spot for me. I really enjoyed to hear about books, the power of books, and Gladys was one of my favorite characters, but I was a little bit underwhelmed with the story. The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Ali Carter, and this was a spontaneous read. I was really busy wrapping Christmas presents, writing Christmas postcards to people, and I decided to look for a Christmas-themed audiobook that I could listen to, something that was cozy and easy, and I found this one and I thought, why not? This sounded like a fun, cozy mystery thriller. Even though this was more of an enemies to lovers contemporary rom-com than a pure mystery thriller, but there is a mystery to solve. Maggie and Ethan are not best friends. Basically, Maggie hates Ethan's guts. She has never been able to stand him, but now they have both been invited to spend Christmas at someone's manor, and that someone is Eleanor. She is one of the most famous popular mystery thriller writers, so obviously Maggie and Ethan are so excited to go. Well, Maggie not so much, because she doesn't want to see Ethan's face. When Maggie and Ethan get to Eleanor's mansion, they're there, they get to meet her, they're very excited, and then the next day, Eleanor goes missing. So now, Maggie is gonna find herself working together with Ethan, whom she despises, to try to figure out what happened to Eleanor. Was she kidnapped? Was she killed? Why is she missing? So basically you have here rich family drama, you have a mystery to solve, you have enemies to lovers romance. So it's kind of like an interesting mix, and I think it worked really well because it was also around Christmas where families normally come together, so it had that kind of feeling as well. And because Maggie and Ethan don't know the rest of Eleanor's family, there's a lot of distrust and tensions. So it was fun, kind of like Knives Out kind of thing, but with more emphasis on the romance part. I feel like I have read a lot of romance in the month of December, and it was not intentional because the next book that I have is The Nightmare Before Christmas by Sarah Raj, but I bought this book right after coming back from YAG after seeing it in Waterstones, and I wanted this beautiful edition with the spread edges, and I kept staring at it throughout the month of December, and I felt compelled to pick it up and read it because I knew that if I would read this book, it would have to be around Christmas, and I didn't want to wait a year to read it because the sequel is just coming out, I think, March 2025. So I really wanted to read it and see if I enjoyed it. This is basically red, white, and royal blue, but instead of having the son of a politician and a prince, you have two princes. One is the Prince of Christmas, Nicholas, and then you have the Prince of Halloween, so Hex. My favorite part of this book was the characters, the friendship, the banter, you know, the humor between them. I really fell in love with the characters in this book. The romance in the book is very slow burn with cute scenes, and then we take it straight to smut, but there's only a couple of really like explicit sex scenes. The rest is just like cute flirting. The main story is quite straightforward and predictable. It's not like anything really surprised me, but I don't think we read romance books for the plot twists and turns, to be honest. The book really managed to capture the Christmas atmosphere, the holiday spirit, and I really felt like this was a cozy read. However, there was a lot of talk about politics between the different holidays. You know, you have Easter, Christmas, Halloween, New Year's, like there's a lot of different holidays, and there's a lot of politic like talk that I could have, you know, left out because I was just here for the romance. But I know that the author has written fantasy books before, and I feel like you can tell the way that she's building the world with politics and different almost like kingdoms. So it felt like very much rom-com for people that love fantasy. The main plot is basically that the Prince of Christmas and the Prince of Halloween are supposed to be pitched against each other, but deep down they like each other and they are trying to hide it. They are trying to avoid it. They are trying to resist each other. But at some point, obviously, they just cannot keep their hands off each other, which is what we're here for. So I really enjoyed it. It was a little bit more slow burn than I had anticipated, but I stayed for the characters because I really cared for them. So I am gonna be picking up the sequel. Candy Cane Kills Again by Brian McAuley, and this is another Christmas themed horror. I didn't include this one on my novellas blog because this is a sequel, so I didn't want to include it there and then not give you any details about the book while I was reading it, because obviously the sequel, if I talk about it, it will spoil the original book for you. Writing a sequel to such a popular book, because I feel like Candy Cane Kills really was popular, at least in the horror booktuber scene, and a lot of people loved it so much that it is scary to write a sequel. But honestly, I feel like I almost enjoyed the sequel a little bit more, which is weird, but I felt like I knew the characters a little bit more. I felt like he managed to expand a little bit the lore behind Candy Cane, and the kills were fantastic. I'm sorry to all of the deceased, RIP to the people that were trying to have a peaceful, joyful Christmas season, and then Candy Cane came around and started to butcher people left and right. And I have to say, I almost felt more connected to Candy Cane in this one. I was rooting for her, not for the town people, which does it make me a psychopath? Maybe. But if you have not read these two books, I recommend you this duology as well. Especially wait for December to read it because it is the perfect read for December and Christmas season. Then I listened to an autobiography. I listened to Inside Out by Demi Moore. And the reason why I wanted to read this book is because The Substance was and is my favorite horror movie of 2024. I am obsessed with that movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all times as of now. I am obsessed with it. And I know the director didn't know who to cast for Elizabeth Sparkle. And then somebody told the director, you need to read Demi Moore's autobiography because then you will understand that she was born to play this part. And I was like, huh, I might have to read that book myself. So I listened to the audiobook of these. It is narrated by Demi Moore herself, and I was absolutely shocked at all the things that I didn't know about her. I think it's very common that when we see a celebrity, we assume we know her life or his life. But when you listen to their autobiography, sometimes you are absolutely appalled about the things that they had to go through. And that is the experience that I had with this audiobook. I was shocked to the core about her childhood, her traumas, the abuse, like trigger warnings for a lot of stuff. Some of the comments that she received in Hollywood when she was starting her career. I was, really surprised to hear about a lot of things. There is also talk about ED, just in case you are also sensitive to that. I have found a new level of respect for Demi Moore after reading this, because I don't know how this woman is sane after everything that she had to go through. So if you are interested, I really recommend it. We're going back to fiction. We're going back to YA fiction, and we have Let's Split Up by Bill Wood. I was really excited to read this book when it came out, and I was not gonna let 2024 pass by and me not having read this book. I was not gonna let that happen, so I picked it up in December. It was one of the first books I read in the month, and it was a success. The It couple from Sanera Hyde are found dead inside of an abandoned mansion in the outskirts of town, and this place is rumored to be hunted. As more teenagers are being targeted and murdered, our main characters are coming up with a plan to try to figure out who is behind the kills. Basically, we follow a group of friends that decide to go together to this abandoned mansion, and they want to find out if the legends are true, if there is indeed a ghost that lives inside of this mansion, and if it was the ghost who kills the teenagers, or if the ghost legend is just a myth and it is a human evil that is responsible for all of these murders. This book embraces all the tropes from horror movies and horror stories and just makes them fun. And that is not an easy thing to do. Sometimes when you're trying to poke fun at tropes, it can be too cheesy, too kind of, overdone, and this book managed to make it fun. It is a murder mystery that's gonna keep you guessing, and this group of friends is almost like the Scooby-Doo gang trying to solve the mystery in town. This is a horror love letter to 90s kids, and it's also kids, teens that are flawed, that have real life problems that are being addressed and talked about in the book. So they are not just cookie cutter characters like the ones we tend to see in slasher books. It was fantastic to read. It was a fast-paced murder mystery in a small town when, then again, police is unable to solve the mystery, so our teenagers have to save the day. And this book is getting a sequel as well, which I'm really excited to hear because now that I've read it and loved it so much, I'm very hyped for the sequel. Moving on to adult horror, we have Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. And this has been my favorite book by the author, but it definitely will not be the last. The atmosphere and the creepiness in this book are top-notch. The story takes place at St. Vincent's Orphanage for Boys, and the setting, it's an isolated place where there's only the boys and the priests that live with them and take care of them and teach them, and they are completely isolated from the rest of the world. They have to travel a little bit to find food and to find other people. So they are now getting ready for winter. Winter is coming and winters are really tough. They are incommunicated, there's a lot of snow. So they do a last trip to bring all the groceries back to this orphanage so that they're ready for the winter. However, one night they receive a visitor. Somebody brought a guy that is very sick and they're asking the priests for help. After that dreadful night, things in the orphanage are gonna change for the worst. That stranger brought with him something that has stayed and is threatening the life of all of the little boys and all the priests. The atmosphere of this book is unreal. The story is very tragic. It is one of those books that is so heartfelt, but also at the same time is gonna tear your heart apart into little pieces. This is not a happy story because the kids here are orphans. They've been through so much already and now they have to fight against an evil that they don't even know how to combat. You can feel the horror, the desperation, and remember, most of the characters in this book are kids between, 8 and 11 years old. And when you read the book and as things escalate towards the end, it's just so hard to read at times because things are not looking very well for these people. The way the horror creeps in very slowly into the book, and then it's just present in every single page and you are dreading to keep reading because you know that things are not gonna end up well. And it's such a dark story. I really enjoyed it. I think it's great. I kind of wish they would adapt this into a movie or a limited series because I think it will work so well if it would be adapted. Another fantastic adult horror book that I read during the month of December is Rotten Tommy by David Sodergren. I wanted to make sure to read more David Sodergren before the end of the year because, as I've mentioned before, he's one of my favorite horror authors. 40 years ago, Becky's mom disappeared without a trace. Now, Becky is an adult. She is renovating her childhood home when the workers make a discovery. Between the walls of the house, there is a bag with 3 VHS tapes. Becky wants to know what the tapes are. She's hoping it's not going to be like a homemade sex tape from her parents because who wants to see that, honestly? But she decides to go somewhere where they can, convert the VHS tapes into just like a regular MP4 that she can watch because obviously she doesn't have a VHS player at home. And so when she starts to take a look at what the tapes are hiding, things are gonna turn into a nightmare. But even though the images that she sees in these tapes are very, very disturbing, she's hoping that they're gonna help her find her lost mom, or at least figure out what happened to her, because in the first tape that she sees, there is a brief image of her mom. The problem is whoever watches these tapes is going to be cursed, and basically things start to escalate to the point where life for our main character, for Becky, is going to be real hell. People start dying around her, and the police thinks that she has something to do with it, because obviously all the people that are dying, that are being murdered, are connected to her. The pacing was great, the deaths were brutal and gory and extreme. I loved it. A lot of violence in the book. Some people really deserve it, not gonna lie. There were some people that I was gladly happy to see them die in horrible, horrible ways. Because they deserved it. There are some people in this book, they're not nice people. And those are the ones that you want to see kill, and it gives you so much satisfaction. The chapters were short, it's like a new dimension of horror. It's a little bit supernatural with a little bit of fantasy in it, I would say, as well. But I thought this was great, and if you can take gore and violence kind of pushed a little bit to the extreme, then you're gonna enjoy this. And last but not least, we have my new favorite horror book, and that is The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. This book is a book that I was a little bit scared going into because I didn't know if it was gonna be for me or not due to the concept. However, once I started reading it, I was in awe of how good the writing was, the characters, the atmosphere, because this is a debut. Unfortunately, by the time I read this book, I had already posted my favorite books of 2024 video. Otherwise, this one would have been on that list. This book is gonna keep you on a chokehold. You're going to be so invested. It also has short chapters, so you feel compelled to keep going. You're going to have horrible images in your brain. Some of them are going to be the stuff of nightmares. Other horrible things are going to be just humans being just horrible people. Our main character, Ji-woon, she lives with her mom and her sister, and she's going through a transitional phase in her life. She is starting college. She has lost the group of friends that she had. Her father left them. He just left, and they have been alone since. The mom has a new boyfriend that she doesn't like, and those are a lot of things that she is somehow unable to really process and deal with. And she starts this obsession with eyeballs because her mom tells her that, you know, if you eat the eyes of a fish, that is good luck for them. So she always encourages her daughters to eat the eyes of the fish when they have fish on the table. And Ji-hoon at some point becomes obsessed with eyeballs, but not just the eyeballs of fish, also the eyeballs of people, of humans, human eyeballs. She starts to suffer from nightmares, and those nightmares are really pushing her to the edge, and she starts to do things that she is unable to explain, but at the same time she cannot control herself. I would say that the majority of the true horror in this book is told through those nightmare sequences, so some readers might not like that most of the horror happens in dreams slash nightmares and they are not part of reality per se. However, towards the end, this book gets extremely violent and gory, and it was very satisfying for me as well. This is a very interesting way of telling the story of a female serial killer, but it's also a revenge story, and I am a sucker for revenge stories. Like I was saying before, I just love when people that deserve it get it, you know? When they are being punished for being bad people. This was claustrophobic, psychological, nightmare, and it was so well written, and our main character is also not a character that you like per se. It's not a likable character, but that didn't stop me from really relating to her and some of the things that were happening to her. It talks about how Asian people are treated in the United States and how sometimes they are being put into different boxes just because of their heritage. The characters are the main focus of the book and their story, and the horror comes as a secondary treat, so to say. So it was a lot about, you know, the family and a teenager that is struggling with a lot of things, and she ends up letting the darkness take over her. She lets those nightmares take over her body, and she ends up becoming a killer. And that is what you can expect from this book, and I loved it. I think it's amazing, and this book ended up being one of my favorites of 2024. Honestly, 5 out of 5. Loved it, would recommend it to anybody, and I am really excited to see what the author is gonna do next. And I did not expect this book to become one of my favorites, but you know what? Sometimes life surprises you like that. If you were considering to pick up this book, I would say do it ASAP. I strongly recommend this book, but keep in mind that there's a lot of eyeballs in this book, descriptions of eyeballs, things are done to eyeballs. So if that's something that it's really too much for you, that it's gonna give you nightmares, maybe don't pick it up then, but I would still give it a chance. You know, maybe you can handle more than you think you can handle. So those are all the books that I managed to read in December, and I'm really happy with everything that I read. Even though some of the books didn't quite work for me, I feel like I found some new favorites that I really enjoyed. So I am overall very satisfied with that. Let me know down below which was the last book that you read in 2024, and was it a good one? Thank you guys as always so much for watching. If you want to directly support me in the channel, you can join my Patreon or become a member here in YouTube. Thank you guys for all your support, and I hope to see you all in our next coffee time. Bye!